quality is really good.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah.
Especially with Buddha.
Yeah, it looks stunning.
Looks like it's 10:30 now. We can begin with the opening and closing prayers. Dorje Changchen Devo Naruna Marpa Miwa Shuje Kampopa Dusun Sheja Kungen Karmapa Sheshi Shunye Rupa Zenanda Jeta Zasum Balen Rupaso Salam Chakya Nyame Drongon Dapo Gajula Soan Beso Kajula Mala Gyupatino Namdai Jinjelo Shelo Gongye Kamba Sum Vashi Zeno Kunla Chashin Devadam Tselelera Chupe Gongchena Nigu Shempa Mepa Jinkiro Magu Gongge Gobo Sondashi Menak Dego Chepe Ramala Yundu Sowa Depe Gongchena Chemin Mugu Kewa Jinjiro Yeme Gongge Mushe Son Bashi Yangsha Tope No Somate Machu Deka Tope Monchena Gomja
Nam to mo chu kun sung pa shi chirang ma yin chirang cha wa la ma ga ru pa cha we om chen la Cor de me to par jin jelo que wa kun tu yang da la ma da Dhamme chu ki pa la gom chu jing Sadam ye yong ten ra zo Dorje cham ge go kam nyor to shu Sangye chudam soke chonam la Changchu bardu kame kyapsu chi Dake chinso jike sonam ki Drola benche sangye drupa sho Sangye chudam soke chonam la Changchu bardu kame kyapsu chi Dake chinso jike sonam ki Drola benche sangye drupa sho Sangye chudam soke chonam la Changchu bardu kame kyapsu chi Dake chinso jike sonam ki Drola benche sangye drupa sho Senchen tamche dewa dam dewe gyudam denpa gyuchi Dunga lam dunga gi gyudam dewa gyuchi Dunga mepe dewa dampa dam mejawa gyuchi Nerin chadam nidam dewe Tanyon chenpo lam nepa gyuchi Senchen tamche dewa dam dewe gyudam menpa gyuchi Dunga dam dunga gi gyudam dewa gyuchi Dunga mepe dewa dampa dam mejawa gyuchi Nerin chadam nidam dewe Tanyon chenpo lam nepa gyuchi Senchen tamche dewa dam dewe gyudam denpa gyuchi Dunga lam dunga gi gyudam dewa gyuchi Dunga mepe dewa dampa dam mejawa gyuchi Nerin chadam nidam dewe Tanyon chenpo lam nepa gyuchi Dada senchen tamche lo chusu drowa chinche laptu so Chulamdu drowa chinche laptu so Lamtrupa sawa chinche laptu so Trupa yeshe su chawa chinche laptu so Dagang senchen tamche lo chusu drowa chinche laptu so Chulam du roar jinje laptu sol. Lam truba sarwar jinje laptu sol. Truba yeshe su charwar jinje laptu sol. Dada senchen tamche lotu su roar jinje laptu sol. Chulam du roar jinje laptu sol. Lam truba sarwar jinje laptu sol. Truba yeshe su charwar jinje laptu sol. Urgen yogi no chansa Pemage Sadampola Yasen Chogi Mudruni Pema Chonge Shesudra Kordu Kandro Mangu Kegi Jesu Radruti Jinjira Shesu Necho Biru Jempola Dojo Dala Wanchiku Genam Oten Bacheso Chodam Dunmo Nudruzo Om Ventra Guru Ema Sili Om Ventra Guru Ema Dotenza Ventra Samaya Sarva Siddhi Pala Om Arini Sara Satya Siddharim Zaza Guru Kandro Socheki Dachamu Vebunamla Lula Guri Jinjiro Nala Sangi Jinjiro Hirakugi Jinjiro Wanchikurwa Jinjiro Yushidaka Jinjiro Lamshirjongwa Jinjiro Kushidaka Jinjiro Ventra Guru Ema
So, first, good morning, everyone. It's very nice to see you here in person and online. It's important to mention at the start of any Dharma activity that it's important to establish the proper motivation and the vast motivation of bodhicitta. So please think, all sentient beings without exception have been my kind parents. These parents long for happiness, but do not know how to engage in the causes of happiness. They do not want to suffer, but they do not know how to abandon the causes of suffering. In order to free them from this cycle of suffering, I will now listen to the sacred Dharma in order to accomplish their benefit. I will do this for all sentient beings, my kind parents, and establish every one of them in the state of a fully enlightened Buddha. When listening to or studying the Dharma, please maintain the proper conduct, which is to be actively interested, appreciative and happy to be receiving Dharma teachings, to be fully attentive and undistracted so you don't forget the teachings you receive, and to maintain a clear, calm, and open mind when listening so that negative states of mind or unworthy motivations do not corrupt the teachings you receive. Okay, now that we've established the proper motivation and conduct, then we can begin. Again, I'm very excited and happy to be with you all today, and very glad that we can gather again to discuss Buddhist teachings. The last time we met was for the teaching on contemplating the refuge and bodhisattva vows, and that was back in July 2022. And since then, I've gotten married, and I'm also pregnant. I'm 5 months pregnant. So some changes still. We're all here to practice the Dharma, so that's remained the same. So therefore, I think it's only appropriate to examine the topic of the precious human life, which is the topic of this weekend. And so our guiding questions this weekend will be, what makes a human life precious? And what should we do with our precious human life? So hopefully we'll be able to discuss this fully this weekend as much as we can. Today, we're going to focus on what makes a human life precious. I should note that this is a very big topic in Buddhism. It has many explanations and many lists. There are many lists, which you may notice as the days go on, and you'll notice it in the handout as well. So nevertheless, I'll try to find some opportunities to build in more discussion into the teachings this weekend, and that's aside from Q&A, so that we can have a little bit of back and forth as we present these topics, which is something I'm more comfortable with having being educated in the US. So I thank you in advance for your patience with all the lengthy lists and for your participation. I should mention that a lot of the information we'll be receiving today has been very wonderfully presented by Raktrul Monastery. And so we'll be relying on this text. So a little bit, Raktrul Monastery was a disciple of Jigme Gyaltsen Nyugu, who was a disciple of Jigme Lingpa, who was a disciple of Longchenpa. So a little bit about that lineage. And The text I'm going to be relying on is Words of My Perfect Teacher, translated wonderfully by the Padmakara Translation Group. And if you don't already have this text, it's excellent and lays out a lot of foundational information. We're just going to be looking at the beginning and preliminary portions of this. So explanations will be presented from Patrul Rinpoche to help elucidate all of these different lists and points. Also, I should mention that it's often just called The Words of My Perfect Teacher. However, the full title is The Words of My Perfect Teacher, A Guide to the Preliminaries for the Heart Essence of the Vast Expanse from the Great Perfection. So it's a preliminary to something like Dzogchen teachings. Okay. So first, it said that a human life, when endowed with the 18 freedoms and advantages, is a precious human life. But we might ask ourselves, what are those freedoms and advantages? They are as follows. So this is the first thing on the handout. The 8 freedoms are, first, to be free from being born in a hell realm, to be free from being born into the hungry ghost realm, also known as the Preta realm, to be free from being born into the animal realm, to be free from being born as a long-lived god, to be free from being born in a border region, to be free from being born with wrong views, to be free from being born in a time without enlightened beings, and to be free from being born with severely compromised faculties. So if you take a look at the handout, under the 8 freedoms, you'll find an image of the 6 realms, and you'll notice that not being born in the hell realm, hungry ghost realm, or animal realm is included within the 8 freedoms. In the image of the 6 realms, those 3 realms, the hell, hungry ghost, and animal realm, make up the latter portion of that wheel. Oh yeah, and I should mention, for those online, you can find this handout linked to the event page on Kunzang Palchen Ling's website. So if you go on the event and scroll down a bit, there should be a hyperlink so that you can download this, this handout. So there they are, the bottom ones there. The middle bottom one being the hell realm. To the left of it is the Preta realm, and to the right of it is the animal realm. We can find a very rich and detailed explanation of these 8 freedoms in the Words of My Perfect Teacher, or Kunzang Lama, which was written, as I mentioned, by Patrul Rinpoche, who lived from 1808 to 1887. He explains that not being born in one of these states gives one the opportunity to practice the Dharma. At least that's the first basic requirement. And Patrul Rinpoche explains, I'll begin here. So as I give these explanations, we can also look at that wheel. Beings born in hell have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because they are constantly tormented by intense heat or cold, which we see being depicted there in the middle bottom portion. Then, Pretas have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because of the suffering they experience from hunger and thirst. So just a little bit about the hungry ghost realm or the Preta realm. Those are beings, here you see them depicted as having very large stomachs and maybe not so clear, but also very thin necks. They're known to always be suffering from hunger and thirst and cold. And due to their very thin necks, even if they can find food, which is very difficult to find, they're not able to consume it. And also they say their stomachs are filled with fire, so it kind of like evaporates really quickly as soon as they do eat it. And also they don't have good interpersonal relations. They're not happy to see other pretas. So they're often in a state of discontent. Animals have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because they undergo slavery and suffer from the attacks of other animals. So there, the animals there on the right side, they're looking pretty peaceful, but as we know, animals who are wild, who we don't keep in our house, have a very difficult time of surviving. As we see the deers this winter, they're very robust and shaggy, so they're trying their best to stay warm in the cold. And some other animals, as we know, even eat each other. The long-lived gods have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because they spend their time in a state of mental blankness. Um, they exist as if living in a state of deep sleep without dreams. And as we know, we are, as human beings, are not able to perceive some of these beings that are being described, the long-lived gods, the hell realm, or the preta realm. But based on Buddhist cosmology, they exist, even if we don't see them. Of them, we only see the animals, and we can tell the amount of suffering that they go through in order to survive. Those born in border countries have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because the doctrine of the Buddha is unknown in such places. So, if you're living in a place where there is no Dharma to reach you, then you're going to have a hard time. That's why he lists this one out. Those born as Tirthakas, this is a term which means people who hold a different religious or philosophical view, and they were known as dissenters of the Buddhist teachings at the time. So those born as Tirthakas with similar or wrong views have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because their minds are so influenced by mistaken beliefs. Then, those born during a dark kalpa have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because they never even hear of the three jewels and cannot distinguish good from bad. And we'll speak a little bit more about what a dark kalpa means soon. And then finally, those born with severe disabilities have no opportunity to practice the Dharma because their faculties are compromised. And I should note that at the time when this was written, there were far less resources for people who were differently abled. And so at the time, at least, it was very hard for people who weren't able to hear or weren't able to see to be able to be guided along the path of Buddhist teachings. But as we know, conditions are much more favorable now. So a little bit of adjustment is could have happened, taken place, and is important to note. All right. So according to this presentation, there are the 8 freedoms that afford someone the opportunity to practice the Dharma. And then there's something I'd like to try, which is akin to the threefold practice of listening, contemplating, and meditating. So far, you've all been listening very attentively, and now I'd like to try a little bit of contemplating. So first, I'd like us to imagine that due to performing many harmful actions, we end up being born in a hot hell realm. So if we can try to visualize what the hell realm would look like. It would probably be dark and dirty and cramped and loud, possibly a lot of moaning going on from people in pain. And there everyone is quite miserable and being burned by fire. And the frightening hell realm guards would force us into those huge cauldrons that we saw of some type of boiling liquid and poke us with sticks and spears, and probably we would all be screaming. And we would have to suffer this experience until the negative karma of our actions is exhausted, and then we can take another, hopefully less painful life. That's something like what it would be like in a hell realm if we try to extend our imagination. So just thinking of the situation, we can understand how for hell beings, Dharma practice is the last thing on their minds. How can they cultivate compassion for others when they are constantly in physical pain? They would be in too much pain to think of anything else. Now imagine you're a little field mouse in late autumn when it's getting cold and you need to stock up on food and water, and you're searching for food at night in the tall grass, but you're on lookout for the predators, such as owls. And being such a small animal, you're weak and at the bottom of the food chain. And chances are you're very afraid and you're on high alert all the time. In a state like this, it would be very hard to think of generosity, for example. You would be too worried about starving or being eaten. Therefore, first and foremost, in order to practice the Dharma, one needs enough peace to even think of the Dharma. That itself is not a given and it's not granted, that it's very hard to even get that first condition, to have enough peace and safety to think about the Dharma. Following the 8 freedoms are the 10 advantages. So next it is taught that a precious human life would require the following 10 advantages. There are the 5 individual advantages, such as having been born a human being, having been born in a central region, having been born with satisfactory faculties, having a lifestyle that does not conflict with spiritual practice, having faith in the Buddhist teachings, i.e. the Dharma. Then, in addition to the 10 advantages, there are the 5 circumstantial advantages. The first being that a Buddha has appeared, a Buddha has taught the Dharma, the teachings still exist, the teachings can be followed and practiced, and that there are favorable conditions for Dharma practice, which is sometimes rendered as that there are kind-hearted teachers who exist and who are willing to help us. So, on these 10 advantages, Bardor Rinpoche states, those not born in a bright kalpa the first one being about having been born a human being. Without a human life, it would not be possible even to encounter the Dharma. So the human life is the advantage of support. Oftentimes it's taught that the life of a human being is the best one in which to practice the Dharma, because human beings have a balance of positive and negative experience, or enjoyable experiences and pain, to be able to be more balanced, whereas those in the lower realms are suffering too much pain, and those in the higher realms are enjoying so many comfortable conditions that they never really have to think about the Dharma, and they're not really thinking about needing to attain enlightenment. Second, having been born in a central region. Had you been born in a remote place where Dharma was unheard of, you would never have come across it. But the region you were born in is central as far as Dharma is concerned, and so you have the advantage of place. In a place like America, maybe almost all of America could be considered a central place, just because we have such easy access to resources everywhere. So thankfully, that one has become easier to meet. 3, having been born with satisfactory faculties. Again, not to have satisfactory sense faculties intact may be a hindrance to the practice of Dharma, and if you are free of such challenges, you have the advantage of possessing the sense faculties. 4, having a lifestyle that does not conflict with spiritual practice. If you had a conflicting lifestyle, you would always be immersed in negative actions and at variance with the Dharma. Since you now have the wish to practice positive actions, this is the advantage of intention. And then 5, having faith in the Buddha's teachings, i.e. the Dharma. If you had no faith in the Buddha's teachings, you would not feel any inclination for the Dharma. Having the ability to turn your mind to the Dharma as you are doing now constitutes the advantage of faith. Because these 5 advantages need to be complete with regard to one's own makeup, they are called the 5 individual advantages. So these are all advantages that someone would have themselves rather than advantages that would be based on external factors. Following that, we have the 5 circumstantial advantages. The first being that a Buddha has appeared. Those who are not born in a bright kalpa, one in which a Buddha has appeared, have never even heard of the Dharma. But we are now in a kalpa in which a Buddha has come, and so we possess the advantage of the presence of a particular teacher. Then the second, that the Buddha has turned the wheel of Dharma. Although a Buddha has come, if that Buddha had not taught, no one would benefit. But since the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma according to the 3 levels, we have the advantage of the teaching of the Dharma. Three, that the teachings still exist. Although the teachings still exist, although he has taught, had his doctrine died out, it would no longer be there to help us. But the period during which the doctrine will remain extant has not yet ended, so we have the advantage of time. Right? That we can still access the teachings is very important. And then, that the teachings can be followed and practiced. Although the teachings still exist, unless we follow them, they can be of no benefit to us. But since we have taken up the Dharma, we possess the advantage of our own good fortune. And then 5, that there are favorable conditions for Dharma practice, i.e. kind-hearted teachers. Although we have taken up the Dharma, without the favorable circumstance of being accepted by a spiritual friend, we would never come to know what the Dharma is really about. But since a spiritual friend has accepted us, we possess the advantage of his or her extraordinary compassion. Because these 5 factors need to be complete with regard to circumstances other than one's own, they are called the 5 circumstantial advantages. So, reflecting on this, it's clear that a great many factors must be present in order to achieve what would be considered traditionally a precious human life. And we shouldn't take it for granted that Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings exist. There are times when no teaching of any Buddha exists at all, and such a time is called a dark kappa or a dark eon. Patrul Rinpoche explains the term kappa, which is a measurement of time. He states, the time that it takes for a universe to form, to be in existence, and to be destroyed, and then to remain in a state of emptiness is called a kalpa. So that is 1 kalpa. If you're ever wondering, what is the definition of that word? It's a very long period of time. A kalpa in which a perfect Buddha appears in the world is called a bright kalpa, while one in which a Buddha does not appear is called a dark kalpa. Long ago, during the great kalpa of manifest joy, 33,000 Buddhas appeared. Then 100 dark kalpas followed. Then, during the perfect kalpa, 800 million Buddhas appeared, again followed by 100 kalpas without Dharma. Then 840 million Buddhas appeared during the excellent kalpa, after which there were 500 dark kalpas. During the kalpa delightful to see, 800 million Buddhas appeared, and then there were 700 kalpas of darkness. 60,000 Buddhas appeared during the joyous kalpa, and then came our own kalpa, called the good kalpa. Before our kalpa arose, this cosmos of 1 billion universes was an immense ocean on whose surface appeared 1,000 thousand-petaled lotuses. The gods of the Brahma world, wondering how this could be, through clairvoyance, understood it to signify that during this kalpa, 1,000 Buddhas would appear. This will be a good kalpa, they said. And so good became its name. That's why we're called the good kalpa. From the time when a being's lifespan was 80,000 years and the Buddha, destroyer of samsara, appeared, up through the time when beings will live incalculably long and the Buddha infinite aspiration will come, 1,000 Buddhas will have taken their place in this world on the Vajra seat at the center of the continent of Jambudvipa. Each one of them will have attained perfect Buddhahood there and turned the wheel of Dharma. Therefore, our present kalpa is a bright kalpa. It will be followed by 60 peripheral bad kalpas. And after that, in the kalpa of vast number, 10,000 Buddhas will appear. Then another 10,000 bad kalpas will ensue. In this alternation of bright and dark kalpas, should we happen to be born during a dark kalpa, we would never even hear that there was such a thing as the three jewels. So, based on Bardor Rinpoche's explanation, there are long periods of time when no Buddha may visit a world. He mentioned that even up to 700 dark kalpas could take place in a row. After this current kalpa we're living in, known as the good kalpa, 60 dark kalpas are predicted to follow. Should you be born during that time, there would be no chance to encounter the Buddha's teachings, disciples, or anything that could lead to enlightenment and liberation from samsara. It's also not enough to simply be born when the Buddha's teachings exist. You personally have to meet a spiritual teacher. On this topic, Bardor Rinpoche shares a story about Jowo Atisha, who was a great Indian master who spread Buddhism in Tibet and was a founding teacher of the Kadampa school. He elucidates. Once, when Jowo Atisha was in Tibet, Ku, Ngok, and Drom, some of his disciples, they asked him, for someone to achieve liberation and complete omniscience, which is more important, the canonical scriptures and their commentaries, or the oral instructions of the teacher? The teacher's instructions, Atisha replied. Why, they asked. Because when it comes to doing the practice, even if you can explain the whole Tripitaka, which I think is there in the handout, hopefully. If not, it means the three baskets of the Buddhist teachings. Even if you can explain the whole Tripitaka from memory and are very skilled in metaphysics, without the teacher's practical guidance, you and the Dharma will part company, eventually at some point. So, they continued, is the main point of the teacher's instructions to keep the three vows and strive to do good with body, speech, and mind? That's not the slightest bit of use, Atisha replied. How can that be? They exclaimed. You may be able to keep the three vows perfectly, but unless you are determined to free yourself from the three worlds of samsara, it just creates further causes of samsara. You may be able to strive day and night to do good with body, speech, and mind, but unless you know how to dedicate the merit to perfect enlightenment, 2 or 3 wrong thoughts are enough to destroy it entirely. You may be teachers and meditators, full of piety and learning, but unless your minds are turned away from the 8 worldly concerns, whatever you do will only be for this present life, and you will not encounter the path that helps for future lives. So this illustrates how important it is to be taken under the care of a spiritual friend. In other words, it is a spiritual friend who, through his or her practical experience, knows what is most important, such as maintaining the proper motivation and guarding against slipping back into worldly concerns. So those are the standard 18 freedoms and advantages that are presented when discussing the precious human life. However, according to Longchenpa, a Tibetan scholar yogi of the Nyingma school, who was also, you could say, the source of these teachings, that there are 16 additional conditions that prevent a person from engaging in Dharma practice. These are also listed. They are when a person experiences the 8 intrusive circumstances, being turmoil from the 5 negative emotions and poisons, stupidity, being dominated by evil influences, laziness, being inundated by the effect of past evil actions, enslavement to others, seeking protection from dangers, and hypocritical practice. So these are some additional conditions laid out by Longchenpa. Patrul Rinpoche elucidates on this list and on these circumstances. On the first, turmoil from the 5 poisons, he states that people in whom the 5 poisons, that is, negative emotions, such as hatred for enemies, infatuation with friends and relatives, and so forth, when those such emotions are extremely strong, they may wish from time to time that they could practice some kind of true Dharma, but the 5 poisons are too strong, dominating their minds most of the time and preventing them from ever accomplishing Dharma properly. I don't know about you, but this one hits home for me. When the 5 poisons, also known as the 5 kleshas, or the negative states of mind, namely attachment, aversion, ignorance, pride, and jealousy, are too strong, it makes it hard for a person to think of anything else. While we may not be suffering in a hell realm or fearing for our life as wild animals do, we may be burning with anger or consumed with jealousy, and this too can prevent us from engaging in Dharma practice. I'm wondering, what are some other examples of how the 5 kleshas might get in the way? Does anyone have any experience with this, either within themselves or others that they might know? So this is the first question here. As Patrul Rinpoche is explaining, and as Longchenpa stated, turmoil from the 5 negative emotions as being an intrusive circumstance to Dharma practice. Does anyone have experience with this?
Of course.
So, I'm asking this to the people here and also to the people online. Is this a shared experience among us? Is this something that we've all felt?
I'll talk about one.
Sure.
You're talking about attachment.
That's one of them.
I'm an artist. I've been painting professionally from 1996 or 7, and I am addicted to painting, to creating, and I'm attached. Many paintings have not sold, and I'm attached to my paintings. So Lama Teja reminded me that I have attachment to these paintings, and it's very true. So I am attempting to let go of them and offer them to the habitat of humanity, which I'm hoping might benefit people. But it's not an easy thing to do at all. And not only that, I'm starting a new class to learn how to create something else. So I'm going to have to work at this all the time.
That sounds really good, though, to be able to create something and then enjoy it, and then also be able to offer it so that other people can enjoy it.
Very hard.
Very hard.
Because it doesn't come from anything, it comes from where I think is kind of a sacred place many times. It's full of what I think is a love and beauty, but nobody's actually buying them, so they're sitting in the storeroom until, recently I've been letting them go little by little. And I was hoping to have the majority of them gone by this weekend, but I couldn't get a ride to offer them to Habitat. Don't have a car right now. But I'm just trusting. I'm trusting the Dharma, because I think the Dharma has heard my intention, but things need to come together so that it can happen. And so I'm trusting that these things will come together so that I can accomplish this before it's time for me to change form. So that's the story.
Thank you. All right, yeah. Yeah, so maybe attachment to our creations can kind of get in the way a little bit. Any other experiences or examples?
A couple people online are resonating with this also. They said, Bodhi Pixel shared, the people online have also experienced this time and time again. And Captain Chronic said, absolutely. When I feel the mixture of kleshas burning within, it's so difficult to think about others, let alone hold bodhicitta when the suffering is blazing within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even though, we're all humans here living in America with such great and comfortable conditions, we're not like the hell beings or the animals who are constantly in danger. Still, our emotions are enough to distract us and to prevent us from practicing the Dharma to the extent we'd like to. You'd think that with conditions as good as this, we would be able to have, 20 hours out of 24 hours. They could just sleep for 4 hours and then practice 20 hours a day. Why not, right? But then, I don't know, is it work? Is it family? Is it this or that? Or thinking or the internet? And it just ends up taking up a lot of our time. Yeah, so that is the first one. So after reflecting on this, as we can see, as Longchenpa argues, even having a human life endowed with the 18 freedoms and riches is not enough. If we're overcome by our kleshas, then that too can be a hindrance to our practice. So let's continue with number 2, stupidity. Quote, very stupid beings, lacking even the slightest glimmer of intelligence, might enter the Dharma, but being unable to understand a single word of the teaching or its meaning, they will never be able to study it or reflect and meditate upon it. Well, perhaps that sounds a little harsh, but I get the point. If someone simply lacks the aptitude, it may be difficult for them to grasp the meaning of the teachings. Moving on to 3, being dominated by evil influences. Once people have been taken as a disciple by a false spiritual friend who teaches the view and action in a perverted manner, their minds will be led onto wrong paths and will not be in accord with the true Dharma. I think that it's for reasons like this that people are told to proceed into a guru-disciple relationship with great caution. And while we would hope that everybody we meet has the best intentions for us, we have to guard against danger and possible deception at all times. And this is especially true when we're looking for a spiritual teacher to guide us towards enlightenment. Number 4 is laziness. People who want to learn the Dharma but are too lazy, without even a trace of diligence, will never accomplish it because they are so ensnared in their own indolence and procrastination. I don't know if this sounds familiar to anyone. Probably everyone, right? I know it's true of myself. I definitely get sidetracked by procrastination. I often think if I get a free day, then I could do more practice and I could sit in meditation longer or do more mantra accumulations. But when I get some free time, I completely forget about those empty promises that I made to myself, and I'd rather get ice cream or go see a movie or something like that. And I have no doubt that if I wasn't so lazy, I would be a better practitioner and much less distracted. So that also is an intrusive circumstance. Number 5, being inundated by the effects of past evil actions. Some people's obstructions and negative actions are such that, in spite of the effort they put into the Dharma, they fail to develop any of the right qualities in their minds. Their backlog of bad actions has overwhelmed them, and they will lose confidence in the teachings without perceiving that it is all due to their own past actions. So based on that explanation, it seems like it's possible for past negative actions to affect the present. As Patrul Rinpoche stated, even though someone may put in a lot of effort to develop positive mental qualities, the backlog of negative actions may be overwhelming. And like losing wind from their sails, they won't be able to make much progress. And then they may lose confidence. And very importantly, Rinpoche notes, they will lose confidence in the teachings without perceiving that it is all due to their past actions. So for regular beings like us, we don't know what we might have done in our past lives. So when we experience difficulty in the present life, it appears as if there is no reason, at least not one we can perceive. So here, Patrul Rinpoche and Longchenpa are helping us to understand that engaging in a lot of negative actions previously can hinder one's spiritual practice without them knowing why presently. 6, enslavement to others. Those who are in servitude to someone else and have lost their autonomy may want to take up the Dharma, but the person who dominates them does not allow them to practice. To my ears, this intrusive circumstance sounds a little dated, maybe a little antiquated. I'm not sure how often people find themselves in servitude to a Dharma practice hindering dominator, but perhaps this situation is more prevalent than I'm aware of. I wonder if anyone has witnessed this or experienced this, someone being prevented from engaging in Dharma practice by another person who holds power over them. Yeah.
As a psychiatrist,
Uh-huh.
I would say that sometimes in couples, or within families, there may be a person who's practicing Buddhism and a person who's not practicing Buddhism, and the person who's not is not supportive and or understanding. And so it creates a conflict, particularly with the person practicing Dharma, because to some degree, that person would be one of their best teachers because they have to practice kindness and compassion and patience and the things to live with this spouse or child, whoever it is that's in the family that doesn't agree with the Dharma practitioner. So I would see that sometimes, like in my practice, in my psychiatric practice, that indeed there are conflicts within families, based on those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe this type of dynamic has shifted a bit in today's day and age. Mm-hmm. It's not like, indentured servitude does not happen as much anymore. In the past it did. So someone could just directly prevent you from practicing. But as you mentioned, whether it's kind of like disagreements between couples, disagreements between parents and children, this type of strong discomfort or maybe disapproval from another family member can hinder someone's practice.
Sure.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Number 7, seeking protection from dangers. Some people take up Dharma out of fear for this present life, that they might lack food or clothing or experience other afflictions. But since they have no deep conviction in the Dharma, they give themselves up to their old habits and get involved in things that are not Dharma. Well, in my experience, it's actually very common that someone turns to the Dharma for help with struggles that they're going through. And that could be any number of things. Sometimes people turn to the Dharma when they're sick or when they face financial troubles. And sometimes this can lead to a long relationship with the Dharma. And that difficult time acts as a helpful door to the Dharma. However, other times, like Patrul Rinpoche explains, it can cause a temporary interest in the Dharma. And once the conditions are better, that person might forget about the Dharma and return to their previous way of life. So, seems a little mixed. I think some exposure to the Dharma, any exposure to the Dharma always can help, but it's a little bit of, if there's a lot of start and stop, that can also make it hard to be more serious about the practice. Number 8 is hypocritical practice. Others are imposters who, through a pretense of Dharma, try to win possessions, services, and prestige. In front of others, they assume the guise of practitioners, but in their minds are only interested in this life. So they are far removed from the path of liberation. This sounds like an intrusive circumstance directed more towards Dharma teachers. Perhaps real Dharma teachers like Longchenpa and Patrul Rinpoche were familiar with this type of behavior that was perhaps less genuine and more opportunistic. However, I have to admit that the final critique of the explanation, which was, quote, their minds are only interested in this life, also makes me question myself. I think most of the time I'm only thinking about this life. And so I have to ask myself, how much am I caring about this life compared to my future life? Am I making sure to tame my mind and correct my kleshas every day? Or am I neglecting my own mind training? Since I know that I will take nothing with me into my next life, but this mind stream, am I making sure that I will be a kind person without faults in my future life? Or am I focusing instead on accumulating material things and building a good reputation in this life? How much will that matter in my next life? How much do the possessions of my past life matter to me now? Well, not at all, right? So it looks like, for me, this is a circumstance that intrudes on my Dharma practice. Dharma practice is supposed to help us reduce attachment to the temporary things of this world, but very often I find I'm doing things that undermine that. So according to Longchenpa, these are the 8 circumstances that obstruct our Dharma practice. Moving on from the intrusive to the incompatible propensities, Longchenpa outlines the following. The 8 incompatible propensities, which are being bound by one's ties. Number 2, flagrant depravity. 3, lack of dissatisfaction with samsara. 4, complete absence of faith. 5, taking pleasure in bad actions. 6, lack of interest in the Dharma. 7, heedlessness of one's vows. And then 8, heedlessness of one's samayas. Patrul Rinpoche describes how these propensities get in the way of our Dharma practice. And as for the first, being bound by one's ties, he states, people who are tightly bound to their worldly commitments, wealth, pleasures, children, relatives, and so forth, are so preoccupied with the strenuous efforts entailed by these things that they have no time to practice the Dharma. Again, sounds like me. Worldly commitments, working to accumulate wealth, seeking enjoyments, preparing for future children at least, and I can only imagine what a time commitment it would be to have actual children. And then keeping up familial and friendly relations and so forth definitely take up my time and the time that I would have for more Dharma practice. So this incompatible propensity certainly applies to me and does indeed leave me with less freedom to practice the Dharma. As Longchenpa and Patrul Rinpoche suggests, does it sound applicable to anybody else? Yeah, right?
It can only be one tie and still cause a problem. Because I don't have a lot of ties that you described, family and friends that you're trying to maintain, all that stuff. But it's enough one tie that can distract you.
For sure. Yeah. Even one can take up a lot of our time and like mental space. Having all of these things going on at once can leave you very little time in a day to think about the Dharma, even if you have a comfortable life and a healthy body and you are interested in the Dharma. Still, if you have like 3 children and you have jobs and everything else, then really hard to find the time. You might find yourself having to get up really early or staying up really late just to maybe get an hour of practice in. I know people who do that and are willing to do that for their practice, but it can be hard for them to find the time. So that is the first of these 8. And then the next one, listed as flagrant depravity. So what is this? Some people lack any scrap of humanity, and their nature is so depraved that they are unable to improve their behavior. Even a genuine spiritual teacher would find it very difficult to set them on the noble path. As the sublime beings of the past have said, the abilities of a disciple can be shaped, but not his or her basic character. So it seems like there are limits to even what a skilled teacher can do. While they can help to improve a student's spiritual abilities, they cannot change their character. This is something that we as individuals have created for ourselves by the choices we've made and the habits we've formed over a long period of time. Our character, therefore, becomes something like the basic framework that we have to work with. And sometimes we have to accept whatever that is. It's very hard to try to do something that goes against our nature. If we're having a lot of difficulty with the practice, it might be better to try to find alternative methods or approaches that are more compatible with our nature. And this reminds me of the 12-step serenity prayer. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it goes like this. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This recognition of there being a difference is what Longchenpa is highlighting. For those people who not only lack compassion, but humanity itself, it is very difficult for them to turn their minds towards the Dharma, even if they have the support of a spiritual guide. Therefore, it is important to appreciate that we ourselves, to some extent, have to develop ourselves into suitable and workable students for our teachers to be able to help. Number 3, lack of dissatisfaction with samsara. A person who feels not the slightest consternation either on hearing of lower rebirths and the ills of samsara, or in the face of this present life's sufferings, has no determination whatsoever to liberate themselves from samsara, and therefore has no reason to engage in Dharma practice. Right. If someone feels no discomfort in hearing that non-virtuous deeds lead to lower and much more painful rebirths, then why should they care about behaving virtuously now? And if that person also does not mind that they are experiencing suffering presently, then why would they try to change it? although it's hard for me to imagine someone who doesn't mind suffering. That seems to describe a person who is not very responsive to their surroundings. If I stretch my imagination, I can compare this to housemates I've had who have had a much lower standard of cleanliness than myself. And so when I think it's high time to do the dishes or take out the trash, they just don't notice or are not bothered by the dirty state of things. Likewise, I can see how this could be applied to people who don't seem to mind that they are suffering and don't bother themselves much to do anything about it. Has anybody ever encountered someone who kind of fits this description, this third one, lack of dissatisfaction with samsara, or a lack of concern about their present suffering?
It reminds me, I was the housemate
Oh
that
yeah,
you speak of.
the dirty housemate.
I was.
Oh,
And that's what's funny is I'm not anymore. But I was and it took one housemate that I had to do something that jarred me. He was an older gentleman, and I would leave the dishes, eventually I'd do them, but I'd leave them in the sink. He didn't like it. He told me several times, and I thought, he's the crazy one. And then he either left the dishes, one day I walked into my room and the dishes were in my room, dirty, or they were in my bed. One or the other, but it was enough that from that day forward, I never forgot it. And then I always did the dishes, like presently, and just became kind of like changed my whole trajectory of like much. So it's just a strange, like things can shift, just reminded me of what you said, the metaphor, to continue that metaphor.
yeah.
Yeah. Like I maybe was much less concerned with my present state of suffering.
Yeah.
And then, sometime in my early 20s, that was around that time too, like things just all of a sudden changed. And it was a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this lack of dissatisfaction with samsara.
There's
Yeah.
three poisons, attachment, aversion, but ignorance. And it's like the ignorance has the different qualities. There's you don't know it all.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know that you're suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Or the bewilderment aspect of ignorance. It's like you know, but you don't know what to do. You're just too overwhelmed, so you just kind of go with it. And then the ignoring is just like, you know what to do, but you're just going to ignore this stuff and go with the other things. And I just, I know that I go through those different qualities, and I see that in other people, just where your attention goes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard thing to do too. It's like when you know what to do, but you're just overwhelmed, you're bewildered. I don't know how to ground.
Great points, and thanks for distinguishing those three different states of kind of like ignorance. The first where you don't, like Jared was saying, you didn't even notice that the dishes, that there was a problem, but his housemate perceived a problem. And then maybe, say for example, if he noticed that it was a problem, but there were just too many dishes and he just kind of threw his hands up and didn't feel like he could do anything about it. That would be kind of like what you're saying for the second one. You don't know, it's a problem, but you just don't know what to do about it. So, then you just ignore it and just kind of like hope it goes away. But of course, it usually only builds up. Yeah. I think it helps to think about this in terms of cleanliness and living with housemates, but it also just can be applied to our state of living in samsara, where the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and our precious teachers perceive that, it's like we're living in a completely dirty home, or we have a really bad situation that's been accumulating, but we just don't notice it, Or if we do, we don't know what to do about it, or maybe we're denying it. Yeah. I guess that's why Longchenpa lists this one here. So that's another incompatible propensity that can hinder Dharma practice. Lack of dissatisfaction with samsara itself. Then, number 4 is listed as complete absence of faith. To have no faith at all, either in the true Dharma or in the teacher, shuts off any access to the teachings and bars entry to the path of liberation. Right, so having no faith at all in the Buddha, his teachings, or his disciples would certainly qualify as an incompatible propensity. Without faith, it's kind of like it's a little bit of a non-starter. I know this can be difficult, in particular for Westerners, to kind of, I guess, to try to have for lack of a better expression, a leap of faith, or to try to spark faith, which kind of has to come from your own side. You have to have faith in the Dharma and that it can benefit you in order for yourself to give it a real try. I think that's important. Sometimes people, they're seeking for the ends. They want to see the result, but that can't happen without you also extending yourself too. So both have to extend themselves. It's not something that, it's not like the results of Dharma practice can appear for you if you don't really kind of like invest yourself and believe in it and believe that it can help you. So both are necessary. And without that, it may not work so well. Number 5, taking pleasure in bad actions. People who take pleasure in harmful or negative actions and who fail to control their thoughts, words, and deeds are devoid of any noble qualities and have turned away from the Dharma. Number 5 highlights perhaps one of the most counterproductive habits that a person could form, which is taking pleasure in harmful activities, which should by all means be avoided. And I'm not sure what anyone, friends, family, or spiritual teachers can do once a person starts to delight in harming others. And this kind of behavior will begin a very unfortunate cycle of suffering that will lead one away from the Dharma and away from enlightenment. It's a really frightening one. It's a frightening one, and it's very frightening to see also.
Well, I think it just reminds me of the beings, you'd think like the beings that are in a position of power in a hell realm are worse off than the beings in a lower position, like being prodded and put into fire pits. Is that because those beings that are in the position of power likely enjoy their stature?
Right.
And it's like that's like the worst that could possibly happen. Is that, because I don't know how you end that.
Yeah.
Be very difficult to encounter somebody that, started to develop that habit and how to stop that. If you encounter a child that's starting to bully somebody and likes it, and how to put that to an end would be, I just think about my own child. Like it'd be a startling thing to encounter. So I never want that to take root.
I think it's a hard one to correct. It's like, because the whole thing needs to be corrected. Like no part of that is really good or workable.
Yeah.
So you'd have to just try to find a way to uproot it like completely. You need a really skillful teacher.
Yeah.
To learn how to reverse that. Yeah. So that one's kind of a yikes one. Number 6, lack of interest in the Dharma. Some people are no more interested in spiritual values and Dharma than a dog in eating grass. Since they feel no enthusiasm for the Dharma, its qualities will never develop in their minds. So true enough, some people just have no interest in the Dharma, which again, are the teachings that present the path towards enlightenment. In other words, they're not interested in attaining enlightenment and are satisfied with the state of samsara. With no enthusiasm for attaining enlightenment, there's very little chance of it occurring. I feel like that's kind of a, what's the word? Self-evident. Yeah. Number 7, heedlessness of one's vows. Anyone who breaks their vows and commitments to bodhicitta has nowhere else to go but the lower realms. He or she will not escape from the states where there is no opportunity to practice the Dharma. So, once having taken formal vows from a preceptor, such as the vow of refuge, the vows of a monk or a nun, the lay Buddhist vows, or the Bodhisattva vow, one is expected to uphold them. For that reason, it's recommended to only take vows that you sincerely believe you can maintain. For example, having taken the lay Buddhist vows, which consist of the following, also listed there on your handout: not to take the life of sentient beings, not to take what has not been given, not to engage in sexual misconduct, not to engage in false speech, and not to become intoxicated. That lay Buddhist, if you took those vows, now has to keep those vows. And doing so is said to generate great merit, more merit than simply not engaging in those virtues, in those non-virtues, by happenstance. Therefore, if someone thinks they can, with relative ease, take the vow of not to engage in false speech, for example, then they may as well formally take that vow and accumulate more merit. But as Patrul Rinpoche explained, if someone takes the vows and then breaks them, this may compromise their ability to meet with the Dharma in the future and may lead to less supportive environments for Dharma practice. In which case, if someone thinks they cannot continue to maintain their vows, they can return the vow to their preceptor. I would say the most notorious one is a vow not to become intoxicated. Sometimes people decide they want wine with their dinner. Actually, the interpretation of this vow is debated, whether it means not to consume any intoxicating substances at all, or whether it means the person must not become intoxicated. So like, if they can control the amount that they're consuming, that maybe it's okay. So yeah, depends on how you take that one. And then moving on to the final incompatible propensity, number 8, heedlessness of one's samayas. Anyone who, having entered the secret mantra vehicle, breaks their samaya commitments to their teacher and spiritual brothers and sisters will bring about their own ruin and others, destroying any prospect of accomplishments. It is important to note that in the Vajrayana tradition, also known as the secret mantra vehicle, samaya or commitment is extremely important. Since Vajrayana students are seeking secret, or perhaps we could say less than public teachings from their Vajrayana teachers, often there are agreements that have to be made. In order to study advanced teachings, the students themselves have to have advanced qualities. And maybe an analogy would help. A person does not need a license or a permit to ride a bike, but they do need a license or permit to fly a plane. Why? Because if misoperated, a plane accident could cause a lot of damage. And no one is going to let a person fly a plane without proper qualifications. However, if someone misoperates a bike, they may fall off or hurt themselves, but they won't crash into buildings. So likewise, when someone requests empowerments of the Buddhas and so forth, these are given along with commitments to ensure that the recipient maintains proper conduct and so forth. It's also important to highlight what Patrul Rinpoche said, which is that those who break their samayas bring ruin to themselves and their spiritual community. It can also harm the preceptor, which is why these things should not be taken lightly. So those are the 8 incompatible propensities that hinder one's freedom to Dharma practice. And altogether, they comprise Longchenpa's 16 additional conditions that impede Dharma practice. So in sum, it looks like having a precious human life entails that one has access to the Buddha's teachings, that they have a genuine interest in and make efforts towards attaining enlightenment for the ultimate benefit of self and other, and that they rely on a qualified spiritual teacher who can guide them along the path. And if you were to ask how many beings enjoy all of these freedoms, the answer would be startlingly few beings are able to enjoy all of these freedoms. And this is where I plan to provide some of the comparisons and analogies in terms of number. But that's kind of a whole new topic. So maybe we'll pause there for this morning and continue after lunch. If there are any questions now, I could take a couple if you like. If not, then we can do the closing first. Page 7. Sonam
Neye tamche sepani Tone nepe janam pamche ne Kegana shibala drupadi Sive sove roa drua shu Gewa deye gewokun Sonam yeshe zozote Sonam yeshe lechon Nampa tuye puvaisho Janchu semne rinpoche Make panam ke gyurji Gepa nyamba me panam Omne gomdu pewashu Senchen tamche ledan lengyurji Nendro tamche gadu tambasho Tamshu sempa kanda sajupa Teva gangi munam drupashu Sanchen rige tsen nampe Sakhe mejon dregu sana Chusishi chokra yape dashi so.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you in the afternoon.